I was just explaining to all the attendees, and you are included in this. I know you have little kids too. So do Ashley, Justin, and I. So we were saying if anything wacky happens in the background, let's all be flexible.
I have some stories, man. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Justin, you want to kick it off?
Let's do it. So my name is Justin Turner. I'm the head of growth for PocketList, and I am very excited for today's conversation on some of the coming trends and changes in the multi-leasing industry. 2020 has obviously been an interesting year on several fronts. So hopefully a forward-looking conversation will be a bit refreshing to all of our ears. So before we jump into the conversation, I wanted to have some quick housekeeping items. So first and foremost, we are recording today's conversation and we have plans to share with all of the attendees later today. Second, we have lots of content to discuss and we have reserved some time at the end for questions and answers. However, we encourage you to ask any real-time questions that you may have as well. So you can use the comment feature in Zoom for all of the attendees to see your question, or you could also use the Q&A feature in Zoom if you want to ask the panelists directly. And I promise that we will do our absolute best to get you answers. So before we move on, I wanted to very quickly introduce our panelists and we can go to the next slide. We have Ashley Birdsall, who is our amazing and fearless head of landlord success. You'll be hearing from her directly a bit later in today's conversation. And we also have Nick Dazé, who is the CEO and co-founder of PocketList, as well as Keith Wasserman, the founder of Gelt Inc. And so each of them offer amazing experience and perspective on the real estate industry and the LA market specifically. And so without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So I will pass it over to Nick to get started.
Awesome. Something I want to call attention to on this slide, something we're really proud of, is that everyone at PocketList is either a renter or a landlord. That's a kind of non-obvious diversity metric that we take really seriously. While we started as a renter-to-renter network of early and honest information, we've obviously since expanded to building tools to help property managers, landlords, and leasing agents kind of streamline their leasing process and increase their net operating income by finding huge efficiencies through technology and network effects. And it's super important to us that we build a balanced marketplace between the supply and demand side of multifamily. If we were all renters, we would build a platform and products that were biased towards renters and wouldn't take the unique needs of landlords and property managers into account, and vice versa. If we were all property managers and landlords, we wouldn't be able to empathize and build great features for renters either. So this is something that we take super seriously, something we're really proud of. And as we grow, it's something that we're going to stay focused on because we want to make a great solution for the entire multifamily market. There's so much improvements to be made, so many improvements to be made that is really critical. Another thing I want to say, Keith, not only for those of you that don't know Keith, Keith is a tremendous investor, entrepreneur in the multifamily space. He owns and manages a giant portfolio. I think it's north of $1 billion portfolio all over the country. He's also an investor and, full disclosure, an investor in PocketList. And he has been a tremendous resource to us as we've grown in kind of keeping the guardrails for us as a product team on building stuff that is high value. So Keith, we would love it if this is just kind of an ongoing conversation between all four of us.
Yeah,
and
good. And I happen to be a renter too. I am renting the current residence I'm living in now while we're building our house. So I got the rentership, I got ownership, so I fit in here too very well.
Love it. I'm going to update your badge. One other thing before we get into the meat of the presentation that I want to say to all of the attendees, this is our first online live event, and we believe it's going to be the first of many. And our attitude towards our platform, our technology, our product is one of doing two things: staying humble and listening a lot. And so you will have, if you have thoughts, if you hate something, if you love something, please let us know. It's the only way this is going to improve. It's the only way we're going to improve. And that's something that we take super seriously at PocketList because we want to build something really valuable. So let's get into it. because we are a technology company and kind of user and customer experience driven platform for multifamily, we like to think ahead, not just what's happening today or this quarter. We actually like to take a pretty long view of changes that are coming so that we can be prepared, so that we can address needs, and so that we can thrive in an ever-changing market. This applies to a lot of industries, but we're obviously very focused on multifamily. And so we are having conversations that everyone might not be privy to. We're seeing data that everyone might not be privy to. And the primary purpose of this this talk is to start a dialogue about what we're seeing, what we're learning, and to actually solicit feedback from the audience about what we think is happening to the market. So as we look ahead to the rest of this decade, especially as we come out of this very trying pandemic time on individuals' lives, their health, their businesses, we want to get a sense of what is the multifamily market going to look like over the rest of the decade, and how can you thrive and adapt to changes by getting a little bit of a peek ahead. So we're going to focus on three main areas: some demographic stuff regarding cities and multifamily portfolios. We're also talking about the way that amenities are changing and evolving in the multifamily space. And finally, while this is probably not music to anybody's ears that is an owner, investor, property manager, the industry is about to get a lot more competitive because of technology. And we want to empower you to thrive in that space rather than be caught by surprise. So we're going to go over some of the ways that we think it's going to evolve. Some of the content is very California centric because we're primarily focused on California today, although not all of our content is California centric. And that's something that we expect to evolve as we go along. So first of all, before I dive into this, Keith, I'd love to talk to you just a little bit about, I know your portfolio is scattered across the country and you're looking at a lot of different types of assets, multifamily. I believe mobile home parks is like a big sector for you. I'm curious what you're seeing both in your investments and in your conversations with other investors about kind of, let's put it this way. What cities and metro areas would you buy the stock of, and what would you short or what would you sell in terms of trends that are evolving over this decade?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for having me, Nick. Yeah, we're primarily multifamily. About probably 90+% of the portfolio is multifamily. We started dabbling in buying mobile home parks. We bought around 8 parks, 1,000 individual pads over the last 4 years. We're in the process of actually disposing of those. So really focusing on multifamily. And we're in probably, I'd call it 5 or 6 major markets right now that we're aggressively continuing to buy in here in the Denver and West states. We're located in Los Angeles, so nothing against the Southeast, Northeast. This is just something we could get to on an airplane within 2.5, 3 hours, my team. So I'd say Denver continues to be a city that we're extremely bullish on for the long term. We've been buying there for the last 5, 6 years. We've seen extreme rent growth. I mean, it's finally slowed down a little bit just because of what's going on in the economy, but I think long-term that city definitely has legs. It's business friendly. You have a ton of big companies moving there. Millennials still moving there by the droves. I have personal friends that move there. It's just a great place to live and work and play. And I just love being in Denver. It's a great city. So we're very bullish there. We have around 2,700 units there. That's our biggest market. Next, I'd say we're actively buying in Portland still. We have around 500 units there, trying to grow the footprint over there. Next, we got SoCal here in our backyard. I always like finding opportunities just because it's our backyard. And I'd say we're buying more land for development here locally because we could get better returns on building versus buying existing. We have bought a few existing properties here in sort of gentrifying areas or areas that have high walk scores. And like my wife's really focused on that. She likes to see where the new restaurants are coming in and sort of focuses on those areas. We hit like Highland Park here in LA 45 years ago before it became really popular. East Hollywood, she bought a site to develop 3-4 years ago. We have a few projects there. So those kind of transitional neighborhoods. And then just for good value, we're building a big building, 250 units in Reseda in the San Fernando Valley. It's like on the border of Tarzana and Reseda. We haven't seen any new development in that pocket for a long time. We try to buy development sites in areas that don't have much new supply. So we sort of stayed away from like downtown LA, Koreatown, Warner Center. areas that could be really hit with a lot of new supply. And yeah, what other markets? Salt Lake City continues to be a very great market for us. It's just very hard to buy there. It's a smaller market, not much stuff trades, but we're always looking at deals there. We hit that maybe 6 years ago, pretty early in this cycle. And then lastly is Albuquerque. Albuquerque is just like been a slow and steady growth market, not a sexy market, but people live there. It's growing, bumping along steadily. During the recession, it didn't really tank. It has a lot of government employees. You have a lot of tech kind of back office jobs and stuff there, and high quality of life, very affordable, and the best of all is very little new development in the pipeline. So we saw rents forecasted to go up because of that, and they really haven't built that much as of late. So supply and demand has a big thing to do. Barriers to entry. We look for places that are growing, population growth, job growth. Those are like a lot of the big picture things we're looking at when we're evaluating cities. And then when we have a city, we'll try to go deep and buy, at least 1,000 units in each of those markets. So hope that answers your question, Lil.
Yeah, it does. It's a great overview. So the first thing here that we want to dive in on, and it's a little contrarian. I'm sure many of you have seen, especially because of COVID, this hypothesized trend of, well, Facebook and Google are going to be remote forever, and you're going to see this rise of the agrarian tech worker roaming the cattle fields with a 5G enabled laptop in their hands, and cities are dead. I'm sure many of you saw there were a few Wall Street Journal, New York Times articles over 2020 of New York is dead, San Francisco is dead, and we really don't think that that's going to be true. There are a few second-tier markets by population that we think COVID has accelerated the trend toward. These are markets that have invested for the better part of a decade or more in their business-friendly environment, their tech sector, infrastructure, et cetera, that COVID has definitely, we've seen in our internal data, renters moving from places like New York, San Francisco, and LA to these ready to blossom second-tier markets. These are a lot of the markets Keith just mentioned. Denver, Portland are huge. Dallas and Austin are blowing up. We're seeing a lot of activity in Miami. And I know, Keith, you've been very active talking about Miami with some other influencers on Twitter. And even some activity in markets like Atlanta and Philly has been growing really rapidly. So these markets we do feel very bullish about. But we really want to be contrarian and say, now is actually the time to buy or rent, quite frankly, and lock in a good rent price in major markets. There's never been a better time, counterintuitively, to move to New York or San Francisco or LA. And the reason we think that is because this is not just a recent trend. This is a millennia-long trend, right? We say internally at PocketList, never bet against cities. People have time and again proven that they want to live in or near major cities for the myriad benefits that they offer. This graph shows urbanization in a few areas of the world since 1900. And the reason I wanted to call attention to it is that if you look towards the left of the graph, towards towards World War I and the influenza pandemic of 1918 to 1920, you don't even see a blip away from people moving to dense urbanized areas. And even kind of counterintuitively, the pink line here is urbanization in Japan. The drop-off during World War II involved obviously a world war and also two of their biggest cities being decimated. And even that did not, over this course of a century, cause a deviation from the trend line. So we think that mean reversion is a very powerful trend, and that nothing, not even COVID, has really derailed urbanization. So while there may be some opportunities in secondary markets, there are much smaller towns and cities that we think maybe the news media has been a little too bullish on. So renters are going to continue to flock to cities. Another big dynamic in terms of predictions for what's going to come in the rental market this decade, we think rents are going to continue to rise in all of these cities pretty aggressively, particularly in the secondary markets. So that is a very bullish sign for Keith's portfolio. Something that we see as a kind of countervailing pressure in California markets is that we expect there to be significant housing market deregulation in the state of California sometime this decade. Now, what does that really mean? I think a lot of people have gotten whipped up into a furor over Prop 13, Prop 15, and Props 15 and 19 last year. What do they really mean? While we think this is significant legislation and regulation in terms of its impact on individual homeowners, if we're focusing on the multifamily market, we expect this to be neutral and or actually bullish for multifamily portfolios and rent prices. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is. So first of all, let's talk about Prop 15. This was a fiercely fought proposition that would have set a cap for taxation for commercial properties and assets over a certain threshold. I believe it was $3 million. And this proposition lost, but it lost by under 700,000 votes net. This decade, the population of California is predicted to rise by over 3 million, and the vast majority of those new Californians we expect to be young people and middle-income renters. So the lion's share of that new population growth will be renters, and we expect renters to vote in their interests, which is in a deregulatory way for property taxes. And already something that we all know, I don't need to beat this dead horse, but California is already pretty dramatically undersupplied in terms of housing inventory. So the most recent data that we saw that was clean was 2017, that there are 1.3 employed persons. That doesn't include retirees, it doesn't include children, per unit of housing in the state of California, and only 51,000 new multifamily units were built in 2019. We didn't use 2020 data because obviously we think that that was influenced by COVID, but that is still nowhere near enough inventory. So what does that mean for rent prices? Well, they're gonna keep shooting up like a rocket while the market is still constrained. We expect double-digit year-over-year rent growth once COVID rebounds. We think there's been a lot of suppressed demand on the renter side because of COVID, and a lot of suppressed supply because of the eviction moratoria that have been put in place at the local, state, and federal levels. That said, we expect starting this spring and summer for there to be a monster moving market. And I think that's going to be really exciting for a lot of businesses. Once the market gets deregulated, we expect that to suppress the year-over-year growth of rents and multifamily asset values, but not tank it. We think that there will be a mid-decade plateau, obviously depending on the timing of the deregulation, and that once new housing starts coming online, this is obviously going to be a huge boom for the construction industry, but that it will attract even more population growth in the state of California, especially around tech hubs and business hubs. The Port of Long Beach, San Diego has a really fast growing tech scene. Los Angeles actually is the darling of California tech these days. Many people are moving from San Francisco down here. And so there's a lot of change that's going to be coming, and we want to make sure that our customers are prepared for that. Justin, Ashley, Keith, anyone want to comment on that?
I just want to let you guys know, it was hard for me to even make it today because I just had back surgery Friday. So I was at a standing desk, and then the doctor doesn't want me standing long, and I can't even sit in a regular chair. I have to like be in a recliner. So I apologize for, it's not just I'm being lazy here and stuff.
It's okay. You look like an astronaut. So maybe put one of those outer space backgrounds in there.
There you go.
On Zoom. I think this section, I'm going to hand it off to Ashley to talk a little bit about how amenities are evolving. This is something that we've seen accelerate because of COVID, but we think that the changes are here to stay. And Ashley, if you're ready, let me know if you want me to chime in, or Keith to talk about his portfolio, but take it away.
Yeah, please. Keith, Nick, feel free to chime in as I go through this. And this is just kind of diving a little bit deeper into some of the things that Nick's already alluded to. But obviously in the age of COVID, we imagine this, as Nick said, is going to last a little bit longer in the post-COVID years. But we've seen, obviously, because of COVID restrictions, more people working from home. There's some obvious upsides to that for renters, having that flexibility, cutting down on, in often cases, some pretty significant commutes. And for employers, having, the insight to be able to see that a lot of their employees can actually work effectively from home when maybe they didn't realize that before. But at the same time, a lot of renters are often finding challenges with working from home for reasons you can imagine, cell reception, internet connectivity issues, even something that seems so simple, but finding a quiet, well-lit space to take a video call. Some of these things are going to continue to be even more important to renters as time goes on and as remote work becomes more commonplace. And so kind of looking back in time, amenities have usually come in waves, and it's kind of silly in some ways to look back on some of these things. Like in the 1970s, it was fairly revolutionary to offer on-site parking. That was a big thing that, landlords, property managers promoted the heck out of. In the 90s, it was kind of these luxury in-unit features like, deep soaking tubs. And then, we probably remember most recently in the 2010s and into even 2020 before COVID, it was kind of communal spaces, rooftop decks, pools, even, property happy hours and things like that. And so now going into the 2020s, we really feel like there's going to be a shift to some different types of amenities that are really going to be based on the fact that renters are going to be spending more time in their units and often working from them. So things like cell signal, maybe even calling out specific service providers and what the reception is in specific areas, internet connectivity and touting the strength of that. And then quality of light and sound insulation for video conferences and making home offices more friendly in an apartment environment. So you'll see kind of an example on the left of how a listing might look with some of these things called out.
Actually, if I may jump in, I just want to say that on the renter side of PocketList Marketplace, one of our initial killer features was just an aggregating input from past renters of an apartment unit as to how bright or how loud a unit is. And we've seen a lot of traction with that. We saw a lot of traction with that originally, but it's accelerated with COVID because we're really the only place on the internet that renters can see without visiting a unit how bright or how loud a place is as rated by a verified prior tenant. Something that's coming soon to PocketList is the ability of renters to submit their cellular reception from inside their unit. And we're going to be collecting data points on a unit level by how well reception is for how good reception is for AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile. This is kind of maybe a pro tip for all of you. You don't need to wait for us to launch that feature. We think that this is a great way to get an edge and to differentiate yourselves if you're not already doing this. Start with your own provider, go to your property, check your bars, and if they're good, market that. Put that in your description because the rise of at-home work has led to the rise of the dropped conference call because someone's walking around the neighborhood and there's a dead zone, or interrupted Zoom meetings because someone doesn't have fast enough data infrastructure in their home. This is something that to some extent owners and managers can't control, and in other ways they can. But if you have an asset, you may as well start marketing it if you're not already. And we think that that's one of the simplest, freest ways for you to begin to differentiate yourselves in this new environment when listing available inventory.
Absolutely.
I have a question for Keith.
Yeah.
Keith, do you, is any part of your site selection, asset diligence, or any of that, do you look into things like local infrastructure, whether it's wired for fiber optic, et cetera, or is that not yet part of your site selection or asset diligence?
I mean, we definitely always try to, wire the building where they could have optimal service. And then we always add like free Wi-Fi in the common areas and the pools. But definitely when we're like buying buildings or building buildings, we're trying to make a larger area for people to be able to work at their property, not just in their unit, but like a WeWork kind of place, but where you have your own private, you could have a private office, a private conference room, and also just a place to put your laptop, phone, and just be able to jam. So I think you're going to see more and more people definitely having flexibility of work, coming to the office some days, just staying at home some days. Yeah, I think you're going to see that. And I was just thinking as you were talking, other amenities that we're doing on the properties, and on all our properties, we really encourage like having pets, not just because we charge $25 per pet per month, but people stay longer usually when they have pets. And we've added so many like pet parks and pet washing stations, and then in areas that have like Denver and Salt Lake City, like bike rooms, we've added bike rooms, and we've expanded gyms. I think gyms are still a huge one, just so you could save money on your gym membership. You could have a nice luxury gym at the apartment. We've gone to some apartments that didn't allow pets or didn't have a gym, so we've added those things. But definitely, I think I'm experiencing in my own house. The Wi-Fi sucks. So if you see me freeze, I mean, it's frustrating, but that's what's happening.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up pets. We have some interesting data internally. About 20 to 25% of renters, at least in our user base, and our sample is closing in on 70,000 renters in LA and Orange County. About 20 to 25% of them have pets, but at least in LA, only between 10 and 15% of apartment inventory have fairly open or liberal pet policies. And so put yourself in the mind of a renter, right? It's already hard to find a great place in LA, but now it's twice as hard if you're a pet owner in LA. Now, we don't necessarily think it's in anyone's interest to do that for free per se, although it would be nice. But as Keith just alluded to, there's no shame in making that a value add that you actually can profit from. So that's something to keep in mind, and something that we.
It doesn't make. I never understand it, because not just we collect per pet per month, but we collect a much larger deposit just in case the pet does any damage and stuff. I've seen one building that was like a bit larger community, 300-400 units, that if they would have allowed the pets, and if you assumed around half to 3/4 had pets in this market, the building would have been worth an extra $1.5 million. I mean, it's just mind blowing to me. And that's just the value. And then the cash flow also would have been up substantially too. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Ashley, back to you.
Thanks. So like Nick talked about earlier, we really foresee multifamily marketplace is going to continue to get more and more competitive as some technological advances, et cetera, come down the pipe. And some of the things that are going to be really important are focusing more and more on reputation management. So tracking those things, improving reputation online, but also within your tenant base, within potential renter environments. A lot of you might already be doing this, but we're going to see a continued and more focused attention on this concept of buildings or properties as brands. So you might already have a website for your property or portfolio. You might have an Instagram following for a particular property. Those sorts of things are going to continue to be important in building and maintaining reputation, will also result in a decrease in tenant acquisition and an increase in net operating income as a long-term result. So that will obviously be more and more important. And as part of that, one of the anticipated hunches we have is property management will look at service level agreements, kind of like tech, where you're looking at your tenants and your potential renter community as more of a customer and treating them as such, and making sure that you're maintaining reputation, but also increased and improved process efficiencies and happiness around the board.
Yeah, reputation is so key. I mean, whenever we buy a building, usually we change the name, so it restarts the reputation, those apartment rating sites and stuff, and then we do our best job to fix all deferred maintenance and get, you know, whatever there's maintenance requests within 24 hours, like, so we don't get these negative reviews. And we'll give residents, you know, Starbucks gift cards to write positive reviews, because usually it's only the people that are really happy or really angry, but you know, write those reviews. So definitely those weigh a lot. And I like what you're talking about with buildings as a brand. And like, we're building a co-living development here in the LA area, and we're going to have Common manage it for us. And they've really become the forefront and leader in that space. And they have a reputation and brand. And I think you're going to see a lot more that kind of thing. And then we have another building that we're partnering with a company called Kin, which is Common and Tishman Speyer back this company. And essentially they're creating multifamily housing for families with young children. So all of us pretty much up here, it's, you know, how difficult it is, you know, having the young children. So essentially everything about the unit itself is built with the young child in mind. Be able to bathe the child easier, where the child can stand and reach the sink, but with built-ins, having electrical outlets where they won't electrocute themselves, having stroller parking, having nanny share, having a common area where you could work on the outside and watch your kids while they play, having a pediatrician on site. I think you're going to see like huge demand for this kind of thing. They already started in New York and leased up during the pandemic at 10 or 15% higher rents than they expected. So watch out for Kin and Common as like sort of that kind of brand, I think, like you were talking about.
I love that. I could personally use a lot of that right now.
Yeah, you both.
I want to chime in with something that we're doing in the platform at PocketList. Part of the process of onboarding for all renters is that we ask for a rating of the property management and landlord. Now, this is not something that we are publicly exposing, because we've listened to the feedback from property managers and landlords that they are already overwhelmed by having to fight fires on Yelp, on Google Maps or Google Places, what have you. But we see it as tremendously valuable data for us and tremendously valuable data for the landlords and property managers, especially because when we're collecting that input from all your tenants, not just the angry ones, or not just the ones that you give Starbucks gift cards to, it helps you get a differential look at and to identify and diagnose problems on a property by property basis. So for example, we've got a customer that onboarded in Q4. They have somewhere in the range of 80 to 100 properties, and they're able to see internally, only to them, this is not public information, but they're able to see that a property in Venice Beach, a specific property in Venice Beach, has an average rating of 4.2, and a very similar sized, amenitied, original build date property in Palms is suffering, and it's got a 2.8, right? So they're able to isolate those and say, across their whole portfolio, what's going on in Palms? Is it a neighborhood problem? Is it a building problem? Is it a management? Is the on-site manager doing something incorrectly? And this is really valuable data that we are collecting, aggregating, and that we're surfacing only to the supply side and to ourselves. It obviously helps us be very choosy about partnering with the best property managers and landlords out there as well. So it's a great breadcrumb. Just wanted to mention that about the platform.
Yep. So I'm just going to breeze through this slide because we've talked about a lot of it already, but it's essentially just nailing down the fact that property management key performance indicators, KPIs, are going to be more and more fine-tuned as we go throughout the next few years. And things like how responsive you are to potential inquiries, to tenant, questions or needs, and then tracking those things, and also making sure that you're specifying and even promoting when it's good, the fact that you have a response time of X amount to a text, or less than 24 hours for an email. Those sorts of things are going to be increasingly important. And then to Nick's kind of last point is tracking properties and buildings separately to be able to isolate potential issues with whether it's the neighborhood, the infrastructure, the property itself, or the personnel that you have managing that. So those things we anticipate are going to be increasingly important.
I think I want to jump in really quickly and say, I think our second free pro tip here from what we're seeing internally is this customer service communication SLA issue. So pro tip number one was, if you've got good cell signal or data infrastructure, brag about it, market it. Number two, we recently did a survey of our user base. We had over 2,500 respondents, so the sample set's pretty significant, 2,761. And the number one issue that we expected to see was the rent is too high. It wasn't. That was the fourth most common complaint. The number one complaint was a communication issue. I reach out to a property I'm interested in and no one ever gets back to me. Or I have a maintenance issue and I don't hear for days. This is, it takes work, it takes time, it takes organization and labor to have a good customer service practice with your property management or ownership, but it does not really cost directly money. It's not like you need to go retrofit your building in order to respond relatively in a timely fashion to an inbound inquiry. So what we're seeing some of the best property management companies do is, first of all, track their response time through various channels of communication. Usually it's one of the following: live chat on your website, if you have the feature enabled. That also would be kind of a twin or sibling of over SMS. Another one is phone response time. How long is someone waiting on hold when they call your company? And the third one is email response time. So we're seeing the best property managers not just track, but then also promise on their websites a sub 5-minute response time to SMS, texts, phone calls, etc., and a 24-hour response window for emails. This is obviously putting the burden of kind of hoofing it and doing the work on the supply side, and nobody likes to be fighting the ever-growing hydra of inboxes that we all have. But it is a kind of a free addendum to your process that will pay huge dividends over time, not just in your reputation on the aforementioned platforms like Yelp, Google Places, but even privately on PocketList. And then also it will help you retain the tenants you already have, which obviously helps you tremendously to decrease turnover and leverage word of mouth marketing to acquire new tenants fairly easily relative to casting a wide net on the internet. So kind of a quick prompt for all of you. Do you know what your average response time is to an inbound inquiry from a potential new tenant or an existing tenant? If you don't, maybe try to start tracking it. And if you do, what is it? Do you think it is quick enough? If you were in the renters or tenants' shoes, would you be satisfied with that response time? And this is something that we're big believers in at PocketList, that communication is something that is takes work, but it's free, and it goes such a long way to communicate clearly, communicate quickly, and to be responsive to people's input and needs. Ash, you want to wrap up this section?
Yeah, this is really just a summary slide of everything we just talked about the last few minutes, which is, how do I compete? So at the end of the day, with all of these changes anticipated coming down the pipeline, here's just some summary, a summary of things you can do and should do in order to stay ahead. One of them is just simply expecting that there will be increased competition. And that means for high quality tenants, making sure that you are managing your reputation, being responsive, and kind of catering to what tenants are looking for. The other thing is, what Nick said about data infrastructure being really, really increasingly important. So measuring that first of all, but then when it's good, making sure that you're promoting that and making upgrades when and if those are possible. Again, tracking your reputation, building on that, and promoting it. And finally, it's tracking and improving the easiest thing, which we think is the easiest thing, which is communication. Just improving that, tracking it, making sure you're staying on top of it. And really, that's the simplest thing you can do for free right now, and to improve your reputation, keep tenants, and delight future renters. So I'm going to pass it back to Nick to talk about PocketList Features.
Yeah, I'll keep this quick and high level, and I will just invite everyone that's on the call, all the attendees, if you're interested in learning more about PocketList, we'll have Ashley's contact information at the end and some calls to action. But I wanted to talk briefly about how we're thinking about these various value props in our platform. So we have both a renter product and a landlord product. The first one, we're all about finding efficiencies, a free component of our platform. It is free to list your vacancies on PocketList and get them in front of our network of nearly 70,000 renters in LA and Orange County. And furthermore, you get the most out of PocketList when your tenants that have not yet given notice before you have a vacancy, when they're on PocketList. So we have some incentives for sharing PocketList with your existing tenants. And when they're on the platform, we're essentially creating a secondary market for your vacancies in the future and building a backlog of leads and ranking them by qualification so that as soon as your prior tenant gives you 30 days notice, we're immediately connecting you to interested parties to replace your outgoing tenant. And that's absolutely free. And then we've launched some really exciting features that are part of our paid package, PocketList Pro. This is another efficiency. Our platform, like I said, lets you connect with our renter base, 70,000 in LA and Orange County. And what we've built, a feature that is for paying customers, is a shared inbox for your entire leasing team. So when you have 2 or more leasing agents, property managers, owners that need to collaborate, maybe you're staggering your availability days. Someone has a day off on a Wednesday or a Thursday, but works through the weekend. When someone leaves the company or joins the company, and you realize that all of your communications with a potential tenant or an existing tenant are on someone's personal cell phone and you have no idea what was going on in that conversation, we're building a centralized place for you to all share communication in one place and to provision or deprovision users on an ongoing basis and have shared visibility into all of that customer service on the platform. And then finally, this is something we're really excited about. This is actually the first time we're publicly talking about it. We're rolling out a feature this quarter called the Renter Score. There are 5 metrics that we're going to begin pre-qualifying all of our leads for and exposing them to our paid customers at the time that they start chatting. So I want you to think to a pre-PocketList era when you're on Craigslist. Now imagine you've got a vacancy and some rando emails you on Craigslist. Well, now when that person contacts you, you will be able to see at a glance the following factors about their qualification for your vacancy. We're rating their responsiveness on our platform. So we think that communication factor is a 2-way street, and we will give favorability to the most responsive and active potential tenants. We are checking their credit score and exposing that to you up front. We are also checking and retaining whether or not they have renter's insurance. As many landlords and property managers have shared with us, that is one of the single signs that someone's going to be a great tenant, a responsible tenant, is whether they carry renter's insurance or not. We're also pre-verifying their income, and we're soliciting and retaining in one place references and recommendations from their past landlords to save you the time from having to go call all of them and spot check their references, or skip that step and maybe find out there's a problem down the road. We're rolling all that up into a metric called the Renter Score, and we think it's going to be really revolutionary because instead of communicating with all of the 70 inbound leads you have for a vacancy, you can shrink down to the 5 or 10 most qualified tenants and focus all of your time and customer service attention on them and get them to convert into being a tenant of your property. We'll keep it there. Ash, do you want to wrap up here?
Yeah. So this is just, hopping on some of the things that Nick just described about PocketList. We're obviously thinking about everything in this presentation as the future goes on, trying to make sure that we're setting up our customers and landlords, property managers, owners for success. So a couple things you can do right now to take advantage of what we've already built and also be kind of a first adopter of new things that we're constantly adding to the portfolio of features. One is claim your property. This is free. It's just a way for us to identify that you're the right person to send leads to and to manage the data associated with the property that we already have in our system. I'm going to have Justin actually put the direct link link to where to claim your property if you haven't done it already. It's the easiest thing you can do to take advantage of PocketList Pro right now. So please do that. And then step 2 is, signing on for our premium features. I know Nick didn't dive into too much yet, but you got a sense for some of the ways that we are providing ongoing support, resources, efficiencies to property managers, owners, and we want to talk to you more about that. So if you would like to schedule time with me, with Nick, to talk more about some of these features, to talk about your specific portfolio, your specific needs, and how PocketList can help address those, we would love that. And for attendees of today's webinar, we're offering a special limited time discount on our premium subscription, which is 15% off. And then when Renter Score launches, you will be on the forefront of trying that new feature, which we're really excited about. So please, my email is going to be up on the next slide, I believe. Please reach out to me for anything. Schedule a personal demo conversation about your specific situation to get signed up, take advantage of that discount. And we're excited to continue our relationship with you.
All right, Justin, do you want to kick in with a little Q&A?
Yeah, so this is the perfect time for anyone on the call to ask any questions about any of the content that we've shared thus far, or even some of the features that we have gone over with PocketList and PocketList Pro. We do have one question, which Nick, I'll sort of punt to you around how does PocketList help landlords in tertiary markets? So I think it would be good to sort of discuss where we're currently scoped in terms of markets and what's on the roadmap for the future.
Yeah. So thank you, Melissa, for that question. Right now, we are bursting at the seams to enter new markets. We are so excited about PocketList and about the future. And this is a set of needs that exists everywhere in the world, quite frankly. That said, we're currently only live in Los Angeles and Orange County. And our next markets are most likely to be, we haven't publicly committed yet to this, but are most likely to be tier 1 markets or primary markets. Again, just to make sure we're all speaking the same language, we classify primary markets in terms of real estate as, let's say, the top 10 markets, real estate markets by population. So this is basically between New York and Phoenix. And tertiary markets we would define as having under 1 million people in terms of population. Now, a couple markets that are technically tertiary that we will be entering sooner than later. Portland, I believe, has under 1 million people still. Keith, you probably know that better than I do. What's Portland looking like?
Yeah, approximately. I call that a secondary market. Tertiary, I think of as like, I don't even know, like Bakersfield, maybe, where we got started. Smaller towns like that, maybe. Yeah.
So our intent is to have PocketList be a platform for anywhere there are renters. But in order to successfully accomplish that, we need to stay laser focused on building the platform, making sure our features are mature so that when we do come to your area, we're in a position to help you as best as we can. So I don't think it's going to be something we're going to be launching this year, to give you an idea of time frame. And past a year as a startup, it's very difficult to project what's going to happen, especially after 2020.
Perfect. So we have one more question, and this is probably best answered by Ashley and Nick, actually, but can you speak more to how Renter Score is going to work? How are you capturing those data points, and who is paying for a renter's screening?
Great question. So I'll go back in the deck to give you an overview of the 5 major points. They're weighted differently. PocketList, so to answer the easiest question first, PocketList is going to be paying the cost of screening for credit score. So that is something that we see as a huge value add to our customers. And we also see as very actionable information to help serve both renters and landlords. Keep in mind, we think the conventional market has, sorry, let me take a step back. We've talked at this point to thousands of landlords, property managers, and leasing agents, and everyone's got their own process. But most often it's a credit check, a funds availability check, And maybe 50% of the time, it's actually following up in actuality with references of past landlords. We think that this is a okay, but a very low fidelity way of actually identifying the best tenants, the ones that are most likely to pay rent on time, most likely to keep your facilities in pristine shape, most likely to add and not detract from your building community. And so the first one, responsiveness, is a proprietary metric on our platform, right? Just like we want you to be more responsive to your tenants and your tenant leads, we want our PocketList renters to be more responsive to you. Our platform, quite frankly, sucks if every time, hi there. Our platform, quite frankly, sucks if every time you go to chat with a tenant lead, you're not getting a response for 4 or 5 days or ever. You know, to use a millennial or Gen Z term, we don't like it when people ghost each other. It's not courteous and it's not conducive to our community guidelines. And so that's something that we're tracking and we're prioritizing. We're saying if there are 5 people with the same credit score, we're going to show you first the person that has a great credit score and is responsive on the platform, active, answers questions, replies, etc. Credit score is something that we're paying for with a third-party API. We're doing an API integration into our platform. Renters insurance is also something that we're doing an integration with. This is something that is cost-free to us and quite frankly is potentially a revenue generator for us to offer insurance products to qualified renters. But when a renter comes to us with renters insurance, we're basically going to be uploading proof of renter's insurance policy by PDF or image and retaining that on our platform, verifying it, and just showing you a badge that they've got renter's insurance. We are also doing an API integration for verifying income, but that's something that we are doing internally ourselves. And then finally, rental history and references is something that we are building as a first party, and it's a very exciting potential growth vector for us. In fact, I think some of you may start getting emails and text messages from past tenants of yours to say, hey, I'm on PocketList. Would you say a nice thing about me so that I can get a new apartment? And that would be, I think, a great sign that we're seeing strong traction on that feature. And we're going to retain that on an ongoing basis. We see the renter score as, think of it in a weird way as like your LinkedIn profile, but for being a renter. And we think that that's a really powerful paradigm to help both sides transact much more with a much higher degree of trust and comfort.
And Nick, there's a quick follow-up question. Will criminal history be included in rental score?
I can say that criminal history will not be in the initial version of the renter score because that's something that's already under development. So I can speak with certainty about the initial feature set. It's something that we're interested in and aware of, but we want to make sure that we do it in a way that we check and retain criminal history in a way that is ethical, that is accurate, and that helps the renter score be as good as it can possibly be. And keep in mind, we're load balancing a marketplace between the supply and demand side. So, so specific answer is it will not be part of the initial feature set. It is on the table as an eventual add-on to the renter score. And this is something that's going to evolve and grow as our platform and as our team grows as well.
Awesome.
That's pretty much it. I think that wraps up nicely, and we're a few minutes. Oh, we're 2 minutes under time. I love being under time. I think keeping people unnecessarily just because you said it would take an hour is stupid. So thank you for joining us, Keith. It was awesome to have your insight and experience. I hope we can do something like this again. Everyone, we're gonna upload a copy of this video to YouTube, and we'll be sure to send you a link. If there's anyone in your network that might be interested in this content, it would help us tremendously if you passed on the URL. Please reach out to Ashley if you're interested in more information, a personal demo, or getting more information about how our platform works and how it's priced. We're here to help, and we hope to have you as a customer sooner or later.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Nick. Exciting stuff coming along.